Okay, so wala naman bang problema? Okay pa ba? Okay naman kayo?
Okay naman po.
Okay naman. Parang pagod na kayo ah. Second week pa lang guys. Laban tayo, laban. Okay, so I think we should start, no? Para maaga din tayo matapos. So hindi naman natin makakain yung lahat ng oras natin normally, So just like the last semester na naging prof niyo ako, so normally 1 to 2 hours lang. Okay? So record lang natin. Ano ba mag-record? Okay, so welcome to transportation planning. No? So when we talk about transportation planning, there are 3 important concepts that we should know. So ano ba yung 3 concepts na yan? I think this won't be the first time of you hearing it. I think throughout your 4-year stay in engineering, so paulit-ulit nyo na siyang naririnig. So ano ba yung mga concepts na mahalaga dito sa transportation planning? So first, of course, is engineering. So I think if I ask you a question kung ano yung engineering, I think it would be very easy for you to say a definition naman, no? Then the next is transportation, then the next is planning. Okay, so those 3 concepts are very important for us to appreciate what transportation planning is. And now, no? So kahit alam na natin yung definition, let's give a formal definition for those 3 concepts dito sa ating course na transportation planning. So when we talk about engineering, so this is the application of scientific principles to practical ends as the design, construction, and application of efficient and economical structures, equipment, and systems. So everything that every idea na nakuha nyo since first year up to now, so that constitutes what engineering is. Okay? Then when we talk about transport naman, it means to carry from one place to another. It does not specify kung anong transport natin. Okay? Basta meron tayong transport, no? It means it is a kind that it is part of transportation. Kasi usually when we talk about transportation, ano yung unang pumapasok sa isip natin? Ito yung mga pagbiyahe ng tao, from one place to another. Sabihin natin from our houses papunta sa school, from our houses papunta sa trabaho. Okay? Transportation does not end there. Okay? And actually, if we want to talk about the economic part of transportation, mas malaki yung economic portion ng goods. Okay? When we talk about transportation of goods, so ito yung different goods from one place to another. Dito nag-enable yung trades natin, dito na-enable yung economy natin. Okay? So when we talk about transportation, we are not limited on talking about transportation of people. Okay? Although the big demand ng transportation, nagmumula yan sa mga tao. Pero the economic portion of transportation, hindi siya sa tao nanggagaling. Nanggagaling yan sa goods natin, sa mga barter trades natin. Kung nakakakita kayo, pag bumabiyahe kayo ng mga truck na may mga laman na different goods, so doon, nagko-constitute ng economic activity ang transportation. Okay? Although, to a reach, you can also say that transporting people is part of the economic activity of transportation, pero it is not limited there. Okay? One part lang siya, and the larger part is always the transportation of goods. Okay? And when we talk about planning naman, it is the process of making plan of something. No? And when we combine that, we have transportation engineering and transportation planning. Okay? So when we talk about transportation engineering, it is the application of technology and scientific principles to the planning, functional design, operation, and management of facilities for any mode of transportation in order to provide for safe, efficient, rapid, comfortable, convenient, economical, and environmentally compatible movement of people and good transport. No? So remember, hindi lang tayo basta nagplano at naglalagay ng transportation system. Okay? Anyone can provide the transportation system, but it takes a good engineer, a good transportation engineer for us to accomplish these kinds of transportation. Paaaring yung ma-design natin is safe, pero hindi naman efficient. no? Maaaring efficient, pero hindi naman siya comfortable. So it is the job of the transportation engineers for us to accomplish all these targets. Okay? Nakapag-provide na tayo ng transportation, na-meet man natin tong mga targets na to. Okay? And when we talk about transportation planning naman, it is a preparation planning to move or transfer human, animals, or other item to some place to from some place to another. Our transportation planning is related to the operation of highway system, geometry, and operation of traffic facility. I think itong geometry, no, na-discuss na natin to during highway engineering. No? And itong operation of traffic facility, some part of it is na-discuss na natin during the traffic studies, yung mga spot speed studies, parking studies, volume studies. So lahat yon is naging part na ng ating highway engineering. Itong highway system, dito papasok yung mga demand ng transportation. Kung gaano kalaking demand, kung anong kinds of transportation yung kailangan sa isang area. So dito papasok sa highway system. Okay? Are you still with me?
Yes po.
Yes po, sir.
So why do we actually need transportation? No? So the most important function of transportation is for us to move people and goods. We've discussed it already. Next is to enable people to travel from their homes and places of employment, education, and other activities. No? So basically, moving people pa rin. No? And when we talk about enabling trade naman, we are moving goods here. Okay? So yung katulad nga ng sinasabi ko, from this area and this area, sabihin natin magkaiba yung products na kaya nilang i-produce, no? So through transportation, no, through logistics, syempre, so makakapag-trade sila. Madadala ng area na to yung products nila papunta dito, and at the same time, itong area na to makakapag-provide siya ng products nila papunta dito. Okay? So ang tawag doon is industrial ecology. Now, yung raw materials nito, nakakailanganin dito sa area na to. So, ita-transport yan. Okay? Through, pag-efficient yung transportation natin, so meaning, mas madali yung trade natin. Okay? And mas magiging efficient yung industrial ecology natin. Yung connection ng different industries is mas efficient. So, meaning, mas mabilis yung magiging production ng industries dito at ng industries dito kasi mas mabilis yung trade, no? And in the result, may enable natin yung economy natin. Okay? So that is our those are the importance of transportation, no? Hindi naman siya limited sa mga to. Okay? There are still other important things that transportation does to our society, pero if we talk about economy, if we talk about moving people, so dito na masasakop siya dyan. Okay? So, importance of transportation planning naman. So, the first importance is the effective use of transportation. Katulad nga nung basically, mahihit lang natin yung mga targets natin kanina. Being efficient, being rapid, being economical, and being environmental friendly. So, mahihit lang natin yan through transportation planning. Okay? And if meron tayong transportation planning, it would be technology-based. Meron tayo ng different iterations. Okay? From research, then from forecast, then ito try nating i-evaluate. Okay? And if hindi pa tayo satisfied dun sa nakikita nating result, we have to go back to research. We have to go back to forecasting and until such time na ma-meet na natin yung mga gusto nating results. Okay? Then tsaka pa lang siya magiging for implementation. Okay? So, it's an iterative process. So, meaning, paulit-ulit siya until makuha natin yung result na gusto natin. Okay? Next is transportation planning takes into account land use and resource control. No? So, land use and resource control is very important sa transportation. No? So, different kinds of land use na nakapalibot dun sa area natin. So, iba-iba rin yung kinds of transportation na kailangan. So for example, no? So sabihin natin yung area na to is purely residential, then yung area na to is purely commercial. So yung transportation demand mo dito, kahit same siya ng area, magkaiba yung transportation demand mo dito sa residential at dito sa commercial. Dito sa residential, most probably, hindi ka dyan makakakita ng mga trucks. Normally, mga SUVs and mga sedan lang. Okay? Dito naman sa commercial, since this is commercial, magkakameron ka dyan ng mga malalaking trucks na nagdi-deliver ng goods. Okay? So you have to take into account yung land use in order for you to plan transportation properly. Okay? Yung resource control, so part na rin yun ng determining the land use na nakapalibot dun sa transportation. So ano pa? So if we talk about the peak demand, no? Yung oras ng peak demand natin, of course, dito sa residential, peak demand niya is sa morning. Kasi normally, papasok yung mga tao dito, papunta dito sa trabaho nila. Okay? Kung commercial to. And if this is commercial naman, yung peak demand niya usually is 5 to 6 p.m. kung saan naman yung mga employees mo is uuwi na papunta dito sa residential areas natin. Okay? So you have to take into account that if forecast mo kung ano yung demand and yung possible changes sa land use within the area. Okay? So reduce pollutant caused by traffic, meets travel demand and response, and enhances productivity, and introduces new markets for the economic activity. Right? So we have two types of planning period, transportation planning period. We have the short term and the long term. When we talk about short term, no, it could be completed within 3 to 5 years. No, this one is 3 to 5 years. Okay? And it involves high cost. Kasi ang gusto mong mangyari if you are doing a transportation planning, makameron ka ng results. And if ang gusto mong result is agad-agad, 3 to 5 years magka-result ka, normal lang na tataas yung cost mo. Okay? Yung long term naman, these are the projects that takes more than 5 years. Okay? It is more structured and complicated, designed better than short term, and involves planning the next 20 to 25 years. Siyempre, no? Kung long term na siya, so you are projecting into the future. Ano yung mga pwedeng maging problems, ano yung magiging change in land use. So, kailangan matake into account mo yan sa mga long-term projects, no? So, for example, kasi mayroon tayong mga areas na dating residential, hindi natin alam, no? Na it has a potential to be commercial in the future, no? So, if we are planning for long-term, hindi naman pwedeng hanggang sa 20 years, 25 years from now, ang assumption pa rin natin dyan is purely residential. Siyempre, magkakameron na yan ng changes sa land use. Possible na maging commercial siya, and your project should adopt accordingly sa changes sa land use. Okay, are you still with me, guys?
Yes.
Yes po, sir.
Okay. So what are the characteristics of transportation planning naman? So first is interrelationship of different modes of transportation, no? Study of profitability, traffic is controllable, determines the desirable demand and supply of transportation, and it should be pro-development of the area. No, hindi ka naman magplaplano para sa backward movement ng development, no? When we talk about pagpaplano, dapat moving forward lagi, no? Wala tayong moving backwards. Okay? And mathematical and stochastic approach in determining traffic and mode of transportation. No? So this is very important. No? Transportation planning is not only mathematical. No? It also involves stochastic approach. Okay? And to an extent, no, pwede mo ring sabihin na transportation planning has something to do with social sciences then. No? Mathematical, stochastics, and social sciences yung transportation planning. Kasi you need benchmarking na kailangan meron kang initial data. Okay? Alam mo yung tendencies ng mga tao, alam mo yung social status ng mga tao. So it involves social sciences. Okay? So the big picture of transportation planning, now from the planning process, so it has 3 steps: the research, the forecast, and the evaluation. Now once na ma-evaluate mo yan, ma-monitor mo yan. Okay? Kung hindi ka satisfied sa nagiging result, so balik ka sa planning process. Katulad nga ng sinabi ko kanina, it is iterative, no? So paulit-ulit siya hanggat makuha mo yung result na gusto mo. Okay? So pag bumalik ka dyan, research ka ulit, forecast ka ulit, evaluate ka ulit, then you monitor ulit. Okay? And once na pasado na sa'yo yung monitoring, so it's time for implementation. Okay? So idediretso mo na yung mga long-term projects mo. Okay? So transportation planning is a cooperative process designed to foster involvement by all users of the system. Okay, hindi lang yan yung mga technical people. Okay, everyone in the area as a participation, no, sa magiging result ng ating plano for transportation, no? May it be the business community, the community groups, environmental organization, traveling public, freight operators, and the general public. So, lahat sila are involved sa transportation planning natin. Hindi naman pwedeng ang priority lang natin is business community pero kakalimutan na natin yung community groups, no? Hindi pwedeng puro tayo business, kakalimutan natin yung environmental organization. So remember, this is social science, yung transportation planning. So, kailangan mong mabalance yung priority mo. Okay? So, processes in transportation planning. First is inventory, no, includes data collection and data processing, evaluation of the current travel demand and travel supplies. Okay? So, kailangan meron kang benchmarking. So, when we talk about benchmarking, so that is data gathering of the current situation. Baka naman, plano ka ng plano, yun naman pinaplano mo does not address any problems. Okay? So, kailangan alam mo muna yung problem sa area na to before you bago ka magplano, bago ka mag-isip ng solution, kailangan alam mo muna yung problema. Hindi naman pwedeng solution ka ng solution, wala naman palang problema. Okay? Ang kailangan mo lang pala is purely development, pero may babaguhin ka sa system. No? So, hindi pwedeng ganun. Next is land use. So, you have to determine the different types of land uses, no? Within the area. May it be recreational, transport, agricultural, residential, or commercial. Then, of course, included here is the distribution of area, population, employment, economic, social, and the different activities that transpire within the area. Next, no? So, sa fourth step, we have the fourth step transportation forecasting process. First dyan is yung trip generation. Okay? So, sa trip generation, it predicts which zone the traffic will flow. Okay, so we'll be discussing it, I think, in the second half of our semester. No? So, the four-step transportation forecasting processes are the trip generation, trip distribution, mode choice, and the route assignment. Okay, so we'll be discussing it, I think, sa second half na. Next, after that, na nakapag-forecast na, next is yung assessment natin. No? Contains the testing and evaluation of the alternative selected before. Emphasis on the ability of the traffic and environmental impact of each alternative strategy and to choose and determine the best transportation system for future needs. Okay? So this is a transportation planning model. No? So basically, this diagram shows you the yung ating magiging flow sa pagpaplano. Okay, so we have the zone networks, the base year data, and the future planning data. Okay, so dito mo makikita yung 4 steps of forecasting. Yung trip generation, trip distribution, modal split, and route assignment or trip assignment. Okay, so again, this is iterative process kasi you are just forecasting. Ano? Kung hindi yan forecasting, kung exact yan, then wala tayong iteration. Ano? Purely mathematical lang. Pero since we have forecasting, so iteration siya. No? Marami kang magiging values, marami kang magiging errors, and you just have to find the perfect fit. Okay? Perfect fit for the situation ng area mo. Okay? So, a model is simplified representation of a part of the real world, the system of interest, which focuses on certain elements considered important from a particular point of view. No? Travel demand models, we have the trip generation, trip distribution, mode choice, and the route assignment. Okay, a model is only realistic from a particular perspective or point of view. Okay, other requisite for effective planning system, administrative practices, institutional frameworks, skilled professionals, decision makers, and media and public. So, what talaga nang binanggit natin kanina, no, this is a collective effort. Hindi lang yung mga technical sa magtatrabaho. Almost everyone included and the social network of the area is included for is needed for us to have a successful transportation. No? Baliwala yung plano natin kung hindi naman magko-cooperate yung ibang sector ng social groups natin. Okay? Are we clear with that?
Yes po.
Yes po, sir.
Okay? So that is that is it for introduction of transportation planning. Let's move to a brief history lang of transportation. Okay, so it is divided in three eras. Now we have the early days, the medieval period, and the modern period. Okay, so what do you think is the first mode of transportation, guys? Anyone?
Human foot.
Human foot. Okay, so very good. So the first mode of transportation is walking ba or crawling? Ano sa tingin nyo? Nauna ba lumakad ng tao o gumapang?
Crawling po.
Crawling. Paano natutong lumakad? Okay, so hindi ko rin alam, ano? So, during the early days, no, so these are the kinds of transportation we have. No? So we have this one, no, hinihila yan ng animals or ng tao. And we have the ship na wala pa siyang direction. No? Yung direction niya is always based on the wind pala. Okay, so for land transportation, the first form of transport is the human foot. Okay, wood or stone wheel with axle connecting it is driven by human or an animal. So I think until now, meron pa rin tayong mga nakikita ganito. Ano? So sa river transportation, so mainly downstream kasi we don't have the technology yet to go against the stream pa lang. So kung saan papunta yung stream, no? So doon lang tayo pupunta. No? Kung pababa ka na pero gusto mong umakyat, so no choice ka. No? Hindi pa kaya dati. Okay? And for ocean transportation naman, so travel based on wind direction lang. Okay? And no navigation tool kaya kung saan saan nakakarating ang mga tao. Kaya discovery ang Pilipinas. Okay? So, during the early days daw, cities' growth has a limit. Bakit? Anyone? Bakit sa tingin nyo cities' growth has a limit and cities are self-sufficient? Anyone? Anyone? Tatawag tayo. Sige, wag na lang. No? So, big part kung bakit cities' growth is a limit and cities are self-sufficient kasi wala pa tayong proper mode of transportation. Katulad nga nung sinabi natin, no, trades and economy are enabled dahil sa transportation. No? So, since we have limited transportation, so limited yung trading natin. So, yung materials natin, no, from this area, for example, this area and this area, wala siyang exchange na nangyayari. Okay? So, kung ano lang yung materials na meron dito sa area na to, so they have to survive on what they have. Okay? Kasi hindi sila makakakuha dito. Wala tayong proper logistics. Okay? So, kaya ang result niyan, no, since it has its limit, no, yung transportation is very limited, so, they are forced to be self-sufficient. They have to survive kung ano lang yung meron sila sa area nila. Okay? So, hindi option yung kumuha sa other areas. Unlike ngayon na napakadali na ng trades. No? Kung kulang ka ng ganito, meron sa Manila, magpapadeliver ka lang. Shopee ka lang. No? Pero during the early days, walang ganon. Okay? So, they are self-sufficient. No? In the industries have limited extent. No? So, this have something to do with transportation as well. Initially, trade was for high-value goods and low in bulk. No? Unlike ngayon, na tonelada na yung pwede nating dalhin. No? We have ships na nag-ship ng mga products from one country to another using yung mga container vans. No? Before, walang ganon. Okay? And goods can't be transported. Actually, it can be, pero in low bulk lang. No? Parang, gano'ng katagal? Gano'ng katagal bago ka makarating from one place to another? Wala kang proper road system, wala kang proper transportation. So, normally, especially during the early days, if our goods na ita-travel is yung mga pagkain, so masisira lang siya. Okay? So, hindi talaga possible yung faster growth. I think it is very evident pa rin naman hanggang ngayon, ano? Kung bakit meron tayong ibang cities na medyo nahuhuli. Hindi naman sa limited yung growth nila, pero medyo nahuhuli compared sa mga nasa big cities, nasa major cities. Okay? Kung nasa NCR ka, so medyo advanced yung mga way of living nyo doon. Compared dun sa mga medyo remote na area. Ano, yung mga nasa remote na area, no? Kung if you compare the lifestyle of the people in the big cities compared to sa mga remote area, medyo malayo. Okay? Kasi lack of transportation. Ano, hindi sila naaabot ng internet, hindi sila naaabot ng maayos na water system. So in result, no, medyo mabagal talaga yung growth ng city nila. Ano? Next is for the medieval period, no? So land transportation, no, medyo nag-advance na, pero it still lack good quality road, no? Horse collar and horseshoe were invented, no? Line or truck used wooden rails and are operated by human or animal power. No? So those are the land transportation. For water transportation, nagkameron na tayo ng navigation system, no? Through the invention of compass. So alam na natin kung saan tayo pumupunta if we are using water transportation, no? And nagkameron na rin tayo ng artificial waterways used for navigation or irrigation, which is our canal, no? And for air transportation, hot air balloon. Okay? So during the modern period naman, no? So land transportation, nagkameron na tayo ng mga rail transport introduced, no? Na-introduce na yung mga rail transportation natin. Yan yung ating mga trains. Okay, alternate fuels for vehicles, no? Iba-iba na. We have petrol, diesel, petroleum gas, and battery operated. No, I think meron na tayong mga battery operated cars ngayon. Ano? So, I think Tesla yung nangunguna sa area na yan. Do you think yung mga solar cars natin, is it feasible sa Philippines? Guys? Do you think?
Yes.
Anyone?
Yes po, sir.
Bakit? Bakit sa tingin mo feasible siya? Anyone? Okay, so I think sa ngayon hindi pa. Ano? So usually kasi yung mga long transportation natin is along the expressways. So siguro I'm not sure lang kasi about kung gaano katagal yung one full charge of a electronic car, ano? Pero sa distance na pwede nating i-travel, I don't think kaya pa. Especially meron pang traffic ang mga expressways natin. Okay? So nagkameron na tayo ng maayos na roads, nagka-expressways na tayo, then movement of people and goods is easier. So dito na nagsimula yung mag-develop talaga, no, yung ating transportation. And freight transport, meron na rin through truck and trolley. Okay? Then for water transport naman, nagkameron tayo ng steamboat and ship, which are diesel and heavy fuel or low sulfur fuel oil yung ginagamit. Okay, nagkameron na rin tayo material advancement, cast iron, wrought iron, and Bessemer steel. Okay, so meaning pwede na natin palakihin yung ating mga ship. Okay, kasi less dense na sila, so kahit palakihin siya, lulutang siya sa dagat. Okay? So, dyan na rin na-introduce yung container-based transport. Yung mga container vans natin na ginagamit usually for importing and exporting goods. No? Minsan ginagamit rin for the smuggled products. Okay? And yung air transportation naman, no, dito na tayo madami. No? Nagmana tayo ng plane, helicopter, jet planes, and higher capacity aircrafts. Okay? Are you still with me, guys?
Yes po.
Yes po.
Okay, so that is for the history of transportation. Okay? So, ituloy na natin since maaga pa naman. Ano? So, siguro mga 6 o'clock tapos tayo. Okay lang?
Yes po.
Yes po, sir.
So, the next part is the land use and transport interaction. So, basics lang to. Kasi when we talk about land use, it has its own theories and its own practices. So, masyadong malawak tong land use na to. So, let's just scratch the surface of land use and see how it interacts with transportation. Okay, so when we talk about land use, so it is commonly used in agricultural economics. Okay, it refers to a parcel of land and the economic use it was then put to. Okay, so yun yung land use natin. Okay, so example of it is it for grazing, is it for growing crops, or mining or building? Now, land use planning can be considered into context daw. First, it includes all forms of planning, transportation, it includes all forms of planning. Okay? Transportation planning can be considered as a form of land use planning because it actually consists of planning for that proportion of land used for transportation. Okay? And land use planning is a discipline by itself, having its own set of theories and practices. So, ang interest lang natin is how it actually interacts with transportation. Ano? So, a piece of land with a particular type of land use produces a certain number of trips, no? So, a piece of land daw, no, is it kung gantong kalaki or gantong kalaki, so magkaiba yung number of trips na ma-generate. So, we are interested here is this a number of trips na mapoproduce ng certain land use, no? Or certain area or certain zone. Okay? Need for transportation facilities to serve the trip-making demand. No? The new or improved transportation facilities provide better accessibility, and naturally, land value increases and eventually, the original land use changes, reflecting the state of the land market. Ito yung sinasabi ko. No? So sa pagganda ng transportation, there is always the possibility on the change of land use, the kind of land dun sa use ng land natin. Okay, kung dati siyang agricultural, na-develop na kamera ng kalsada, ano mangyayari? Normally, nagiging residential. Ano? May bibili ng napakalaking parcel ng land, ita-transform siya, gagawin siyang subdivision. So, automatically, nagiging residential na siya. Okay? And pag nagtuloy-tuloy, meron siyang magpuput up ng mga businesses. Okay? So, from residential, magta-transform ulit yung area natin. From residential, magiging commercial naman. Okay? And the cycle continues. Okay? So the movement of people and goods in a city, referred to as traffic flow, is the joint consequent of land activity, which is the demand, and the capability of the transportation system to handle this traffic flow, which is the supply. Okay? So that basically summarizes land use and transport interaction. Okay, so some concepts and definition. This one is for your own reading na lang. No? So kindly familiarize yourself lang. I think most of it are self-explanatory naman. Okay? Dito tayo. So, dito tayo sa land use development method. Okay, so land use planning for a city is a complex task daw. Now, land is allocated among alternative uses in private markets with public regulation. Development mainly from locational decision by a large number of private developers. Now, so land use models serve two purposes. First is to forecast the total activities of an urban area and allocating these activities among predetermined sets. So usually, no, yung aaralin nating method of interaction between land use and transport, no, ang nagdedetermine ng paglipat ng mga tao from one zone to another is yung employment. Okay? So that is the Hansen's accessibility model. No? Predict the location of population based on the premise that employment is the predominant factor. No? So for example, we have an area here. So it is divided into 3 zones. Sabihin natin, this one is zone 1, this one is zone 2, and this one is zone 3. Okay? So itong Hansen's accessibility model, so ang theory niya is kung saan malaki yung employment, doon maglilipatan yung mga tao. Okay? So sabihin natin dito sa zone 1, dito malaki yung employment. Maraming employment na pwede. So there are people or residents from zone 2 or zone 3 that will transfer to zone 1. Bakit? Kasi nandun yung trabaho eh. Kailangan mo mabuhay eh. Ano? So magta-transfer yung mga tao sa zone 2 at zone 3, lilipat sila sa zone 1. So in result, ang mangyayari, ano mangyayari doon? So yung trip demand itong zone 1 is tataas. Okay? And itong zone 2 and zone 3 naman, so bababa to if the population will remain constant. Okay? So This is a keyword. If the population remain constant, sabihin natin, ngayong year na to, 5,000. Okay? So, 5 years from now, kung 5,000 pa rin yan, and dito sa Zone 1, maraming employment opportunities. So, itong Zone 1, tataas ang population nito. Maglilipatan yung ibang tao dito sa Zone 2 at sa Zone 3. Okay? However, it is different naman pag sinabi natin, no? Today, ang population ng city na to is 5,000. And 5 years from now, magiging 8,000 for example. So expect mo, itong Zone 1, tataas yan. Itong Zone 2, tataas din yan. At itong Zone 3, tataas din yan. Okay? Kasi itong Zone 1, it has a holding capacity. No? Hanggang doon lang sa point na yon, pwedeng mag-allow ng residential people. Hanggang sa point lang na to, ito yung pinaka-saturation point niya na pwede lang tumira ang mga tao. Okay? Kasi ang tendency ng mga tao, makikita dito sa Zone 1, no? Ang daming trabaho, apply tayo dyan. Okay? However, if you compare yung living life, yung living status ng mga tao dito sa Zone 1 sa Zone 2, no? Parang maluwag pa dito sa Zone 2. Sacrifice ko na lang yung travel time, no? Dito ako titira sa Zone 2, pero dito ako sa Zone 1 magtatrabaho. Okay? So, it's a matter of perspective. Okay? Kung yung Zone 1 na to, sobrang laki, no? Compare dito sa Zone 2, another example natin is kung ganito, yung Zone 1 mo, sobrang laki, ito lang yung Zone 2, yan, sabihin natin there are 4 zones, no? So, this is Zone 1, Zone 2, Zone 3, and Zone 4. Ano? So, sabihin natin dito sa Zone 1 yung majority of employment. Okay? Itong Zone 2, no? So, yung ang tendency ng mga tao, lilipat sila dito sa Zone 1. Tama. Tama. Kasi nandito yung employment no? So, itong tao sa Zone 2 na to, so ang tendency, Zone 2, Zone 3, Zone 4, lilipat sila ngayon papunta dito sa Zone 1. Okay? Eh ngayon, titira sila dyan. Meron yung holding capacity. When we talk about the holding capacity, ito yung kayang i-hold na residential area. Ito yung natitirang residential area ng zone na to. Okay? So, if you compare it dito sa living opportunities mo, dito sa Zone 1, from Zone 2, for example, yung tao dito sa Zone 2, na medyo maliit ang Zone 2 compared sa Zone 1. Kahit sobrang dami na nakatira dito sa Zone 1, and in retrospective, kung titingnan mo, if you still compare Zone 1 and Zone 2, parang mas maluwag pa rin sa Zone 1. Okay? So, ang tendency ng mga tao, dito na talaga sila titira. No? So, mag-move pa rin yung Zone 2 kahit medyo mas madaming tao na to, kahit mas madaming tao na dito sa Zone 1 kaysa dito sa Zone 2 na to. Okay? Naintindihan ba ako, guys?
Yes po, sir.
Naintindihan yung logic?
Yes.
Okay. So, we have, dito sa Hansen's accessibility model, we have the accessibility index, of course, from Zone I to Zone J. Okay, so ito yan, AIJ. So, it is equal to E over D. Okay, so E is our total employment for that zone, and D is the distance between I and J. So, usually, this is in minutes or in hours. Min or hours. Okay? And B is an exponent. So, ito is always given yan. So, depending on the kind of the situation, yung meron sa area na to, so, yun yung magdedepend, yun yung magsasabi ng exponent natin. Okay? And, of course, the overall accessibility index is just the summation of the accessibility index. Summation lang yan. Okay? Then, we have the holding capacity, the amount of vacant land suitable and available for residential use. Yan yung sinasabi natin. Okay? So, that is yung H natin. Okay? So, meron tayong development potential, which is D. So, it is just the product of the accessibility index times the holding capacity. So, later, meron tayong example for that. Okay? And we have the additional factor in attracting future population to the zone. No? So, total growth in population, ito yan. Okay? So, ito yung GI natin. Okay? So, in order for us to understand, let's try to solve this one. Okay? So, basahin niyo muna, guys. Okay? So, sabi dito, a small